Oh, get out of here. Sorry. One of my teammates
You're
just
fine.
walked into the great room.
You're good. Excuse me.
You're
Sorry,
good. You're
good
good.
start here, huh?
Man,
Welcome
I'm sorry I
to.
rushed you with that one joke.
No, you're good. Welcome to the July edition of Eureka Whiskey Club 2023. As always, Trevor here, joining you live from my home bar, and we are joined by Mitch Mahar. And Mitch made me laugh because I asked him 2 seconds before we went live the proper pronunciation of his last name, and he said Mahar, like handlebar Mahar. So that's why I was a bit choked up to get started here. But thank you for joining us. As always, we're really excited to be featuring WhistlePig this month, and a really cool pick that we'll talk about later. But Mitch, want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll go ahead and talk about the prizes that we're giving away.
Sure, heck yeah. So thank you for the introduction, by the way. So yeah, I am Mitch Mahar. I run research and development here at WhistlePig Whiskey. I'm involved in helping to blend bonds for like some of the common core things like, 10-year, 12-year, 15-year, but I spend most of my time designing out things for potential boss hogs or other limited time offers that we put out like summer stock, which was my most recent project that I worked on. But yeah, that's sort of the long and short of what I do here. So I didn't announce, but I'm currently sitting in Shoreham, Vermont. I apologize for the lighting. I have this great LED light in pitch black darkness out here because it is 9 o'clock out here in Shoreham, Vermont.
What area of the distillery are you in right now?
Oh, so I'm in our great room. So I actually have our bar right across the way from me, and it's unfortunately just a little too far out of reach for me to pour myself another glass. But I have one, so I'll have to make this one count.
All right, got it. So, well, Mitch, it's a pleasure to have you. And as always, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, highly recommend throwing a comment or a question in the comment section. And if you are a member, we will try our best to get to as many questions as possible at the end of the call. And then at the end, as always, we'll pick one or two, or pick two questions, or Mitch will pick two questions, his favorite questions of the night. And then we're going to give away a couple good prizes. First place tonight is going to be a signed bottle of WhistlePig 18 year. That's going to be signed by the entire distilling team. And then second place will get a signed bottle of farm stock, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is only available at the distillery, correct?
So farm stock actually does have wider distribution from that. However, we do not regularly sign our own bottles. So it'll be one of one.
Awesome. So you tell us a little bit about yourself. You want to give us maybe a little bit more background on how you came into the distilling industry and kind of your journey and how you ended up at WhistlePig?
Sure. So, I guess it all starts when I was, I guess it really all starts when I was 18. I quickly learned that although you have to be 21 to buy alcohol, you can be 18 and buy everything it takes to make beer. And I was always sort of a science nerd. So, sort of making my own homebrew wasn't that difficult. And I had also worked through a liquor store throughout all of college. And then when I got out of college, I, of course, made some great friends throughout the industry, via distributors and this, that, the other. But a friend of mine started working at a winery in New Jersey. And she was like, hey, we need a guy to help us run our lab down here who also can, sort of navigate his way around wine. Like, do you want to hop in? And so I built out a quality assurance department for this small little winery in New Jersey. And I did that for years. And it was great. I got exposed to so many different wines, so many different winemakers. But then from there, a buddy of mine who I graduated high school with, who I sort of lost touch with, he had moved up to Vermont because he was going to be a ski bum and worked at a brewery. And I was like, oh, brewing, that's a cool job. I'm in the wine world. We're similar, but it wasn't quite the same. But he had someone who had left the company and was like, hey, Mitch, I know you've been brewing forever and I've had your beer and you're in a wine cellar now. So like, it's not that big of a switch. Do you think you'd want to come up to Vermont and, be a professional brewer? And I was like, heck yeah. So then I started professionally brewing at a brew house that had a 120 barrel per batch capacity. So pretty large for this region. And I did that for a number of years, and that was great. Met even more people. And one of my buddies who worked at the brewery He happened to be next door neighbors with the head distiller here. And so they were thinking about hiring on another distiller. And I was like, oh man, hang on. So I've been in wine, I've been in beer. Can I complete the trifecta and get into whiskey? Because like that's like the dream job. I mean, it doesn't get better than whiskey. And so I just sent my resume with no prompting, no job posting, no nothing. And I got a call the next day and it was like, we have your resume here. And like, we didn't post a job. And I'm like, I know. And they were like, okay. So when can you come in for an interview? Because we sort of like what we see here. And then the rest is history. I've been here ever since. And so that was in, oh my goodness, what, mid 2020?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are you able to say what brewery it was that you were working at? Or
I mean, I don't see why not. So I had worked for Otter Creek Brewing Company. And so we'd also done a lot of like contract work for Long Trail Brewing Company. And then also a smaller outfit up here known as The Shed.
Nice. That's so it was kind of you strong armed them to hiring you, it sounds like.
I mean, I'd like to think my resume sort of spoke for itself, but I really wanted to get up here. So, I was really sure to put a good polish on that.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of WhistlePig and, from the beginning and who Dave Pickerel was and kind of his legacy and just the background of the distillery?
Sure. I mean, so I don't want to get too deep into it because, I mean, this dairy farm that the distillery is placed on has been here for basically ever. I want to say somewhere around the time when my mustache was first in fashion. But so the distillery the company got started in, oh my goodness, what was it, 2007? And it really started with Dave Pickerel, who was sort of like a Johnny Appleseed of distillers. Like he had such a passion for spirits overall, but really for whiskey. He sort of got his start at Maker's Mark, being their master distiller. But he always had this like hankering for rye and really thought that like that was going to be the next big whiskey, especially in the early or mid 2000s when we started seeing like all these pre-prohibition style cocktails start sort of cropping up. And a lot of bars were using bourbon because that was readily available. And Dave was like, you don't want bourbon for pre-prohibition style whiskey. Like you want rye. Like that was America's whiskey back in the day. So he sort of had this dream of like starting like a really, top end rye whiskey company. And, sort of the rest is history. Starts off with 10 year, then moved into 12, 15. And I mean, I can get in a little bit more into some of how those got formed. The long story short is, Kentucky thought we were crazy for starting, exclusively a rye whiskey company, let alone having a high age statement and also using an absurdly high rye content to our grain bill. And so Kentucky's like, oh, it's a flash in the pan. No one's going to like that. And then, of course, we were wildly successful. And they're like, well, you can't do it again. And then, of course, Dave Pickerel, using all of his knowledge of spirits, crafted 12 year for us. Sort of tearing a page out of the Scotch whiskey handbook where finishing casks reign supreme, and opted to not just use one or two finishes, but three between Port Madeira and Sauterne. And then, of course, Kentucky was also like, all right, so you've done it twice, but like you won't do it a third time. And then in comes in 15 year that he crafted up, which, of course, features our Vermont terroir in the way of its barrels. So we actually found a company in the Green Mountains that we source our lumber from. We send it to our cooperage in Kentucky to make barrels for us. And then we finish our 15 year in that. And I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole portfolio, otherwise we'll need 5 hours. But yeah, he really built the playground that I play on today.
Can you talk a little bit about like just rye whiskey in general and the challenges that come along with it versus making a bourbon and some of the benefits or some of the different flavor profiles that you enjoy and obviously Dave saw great promise in and have blossomed into what WhistlePig is today? Like what makes rye so much or in your opinion, what makes, I don't want to say better, but like what was the reason Dave
it's
prefers
better, it's okay. No, but I mean, so honestly, a lot of the benefit around rye is just, well, I guess let me back up the question just a touch. You would ask, like, how do you feel about working with rye? Rye it's a labor of love making rye whiskey. I mean, from its cultivation to, mashing it in, grinding it, having it ferment, it's really a pain in the ass. And you do it the whole time, sort of having your eyes on the prize in the future, being like, all right, I know this is going to be great whiskey. I just need to get through this now. But part of what makes it great is the fact that it has all of these flavors that are like really tightly condensed in that grain, and they carry through distillation. They stand up to all these barrel sugars and high barrel chars. Like, you never lose the grain with rye. I mean, if you go too high with corn, or honestly even malted barley, like, they can get beat up in the process. They sort of get lost in the sauce. Like, part of what makes rye great is that it's always stands proud of what it is.
Yeah, I think that I love rye personally. I think it's awesome, and I think it stands up a lot better in cocktails. It's more layered. I think it just sometimes, and obviously there's amazing bourbons out there, and I'm not taking sides here. We know where
it's all right. Listen, everyone has their favorites. I'm not going to knock you, and it's not like I don't drink bourbon, that I don't drink single malt, but
yeah,
I spend a lot of time with rye.
Absolutely. So obviously, I had the pleasure of going to the farm back in January with some people in our company, and we had the pleasure of I think we tasted like over 20 different barrels with you guys, a piggyback and 10-year, and I think we got to do like our own cool 12-year blend.
Mm-hmm.
That was really fun as well, just playing with the different ratios of Madeira, Sauterne, and Port. Thank you.
I got you.
Can you walk us through like kind of how you cultivate those tastings for groups like us, or just guests in general when they come to the club or to the farm, and how obviously there's a science and there's an art behind that as well, to not only put forth things that you like, but things that you think the people that are tasting would like.
Well, yeah, I mean, granted, I don't put anything in a tasting that I wouldn't want to drink myself, but really the joy of like running the single barrel program is that like everyone gets to bring their own palate to the table. And like, granted, whenever I make whiskey, I always make the best whiskey possible, but like everyone's palate's slightly different. Like it's sort of like saying that like everyone should only have like vanilla or only have chocolate. Like there's so much more nuance to that. And so like when I pick my barrels for my single barrel program, I really go through the trouble to make sure that I'm pulling barrels from different spots in my warehouse. So that way, I have sort of like my high and dry barrels that are sort of like up high in my rick house along the south facing wall. But then I try to get some middle of the pack barrels, so that way like you can get some more balanced barrel nuance. But then like there are some really great ground floor barrels that are also in there. And so I try to like pull a whole variety. And so whenever I have people come through to pick their own single barrel, I try to give them a spread, and I keep track of all the data. And, once they pick a barrel, I'll tell you everything there is to know about the barrel. But I really love the moment of just blind presenting 4 glasses to someone, just being like, let your palate be your guide. Smell each one, taste each one, like really get into it, but like pick your favorite. This is your WhistlePig now.
That's awesome. So I know in the past WhistlePig has sourced from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of juice are you still sourcing from Canada, and what percentage of the juice are you guys making on the farm?
I mean, I got to be honest, I haven't looked at the numbers in a bit. We're still sourcing from Canada, and we will probably source from Canada for the foreseeable future. A lot of that has to do with the fact that like now we're an international company. It was fun. I got to be here from the time when we weren't even in all 50 states yet until, we started launching internationally. I was there for the launch of Japan, which was a wild time. But, Dave Pickerel, when he started this company, he started this with Source Juice, but from day one, we had the farm. He wanted to grow grain. He wanted to create our own whiskey. We wanted stills. We wanted bigger, better stills. And like, we will always strive to make more and more and more and more and more whiskey here on the farm in Vermont. But yeah, right now we're just too gosh darn popular. Too many people like our whiskey. We just can't quite keep up. I will say everything in our single barrel program, in terms of like, rye, everything else, like, or at least for our piggyback, That's 100% Vermont juice. So although we couldn't make it 100% Vermont globally, for those who come to the farm and pick out a piggyback barrel, like that is all us, top to bottom.
So the liquid that we have in these picks is from made at the distillery in Vermont.
Mm-hmm. Right? You have 2 piggyback barrels. Am I right? Am I losing it?
Oh, we have more than 2. We have like 8.
Perfect. Then yeah, all 8 of those, all made here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly what I was in. I know Blaine is watching in the background. I don't know if he can pop on, but we tasted something really special in like the tiki bar area of. I want to say it was something like it was aged in maple.
Oh, all right. So here's a fun little story about that. Oh, I'm live, aren't I? Oh, I'm getting in trouble. All right, it's fine. Well,
sorry, am I not?
Performance will be fine. That's all right.
This is not something that is being released. I couldn't remember what it was, and I was hoping just to tease all our members of something cool we got to taste that's not available. But
sure, no, absolutely, because it's really, really good. But so being in Vermont, we're friends with all of our neighbors, and we're in a really rich agricultural area. But we also have like a ton of maple trees. So there's a lot of sugaring operations around here. And of course, we have our own sugaring operation on the farm. But for that particular batch that we had made, we ended up making, I suppose technically it's a rum, but we call it a maple spirit. We ended up fermenting like, oh my goodness, like 750 gallons of maple syrup. And man, I thought rye was tough. That is a whole other animal. I mean, like, rye is sticky when you mash it. Like, it is a really thick, sort of like very thick oatmeal-y and peanut buttery almost texture in terms of its mash.
Yeah, you don't want to clean
literal maple syrup is something else. But no, so yeah, we fermented out maple syrup. We ran it through our stills, and we got this really beautiful, bright, like light butterscotchy style sort of rum. And yeah, we don't send that out. I will never do it again because it was terrible. Or at least the fermentation part of it was awful.
Well, it was delicious. It wasn't terrible.
Oh, I mean, listen, if rye can teach you nothing else, it is that, like, if you are willing to like work through the labor of like fermentation and everything else, and you can get it through the still, the end result is going to be amazing. If you're fermenting anything and it's easy and you can run it through the still, you're probably making some really boring vodka. But yeah, no, so that maple spirit is fantastic.
I want to touch on something that was that I didn't really know until I went to the distillery, and I'm not sure the general public knows because, but it was really inspiring to see the focus on female leadership at WhistlePig, and finding out that your head distiller is a woman, and you have a lot of your company is very focused on female leadership. Can you talk a little bit about just that in general, and how WhistlePig is kind of trying to change, make a positive impact on the whiskey world with the impact of women at the helm?
Sure. I mean, this is always one of those things where, not that we're proud to have our like female-led team, but like they're not leading the team because they're females. Like they are remarkably talented and incredibly intelligent and excellent at their craft. Like, it's really a lot of our marketing team is like, oh, female-led team. And it's like, yeah, but they're also the best. So like, yeah, they're in the positions they deserve to be in. But no, they are remarkable. I mean, so our head of whiskey development, Liz Rhodes, super, super smart, like easily one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my entire life. And I mean, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at my job. I've been in various forms of the alcohol industry basically since I was 18. And I've learned a lot over that time. And I swear to God, she makes me feel like I sniff glue. Like she is on a whole other level of knowledge that I strive to reach.
And she's a blast to hang out with, and I learned so much just from having dinner with her one night and talking to her, and it was just a phenomenal experience. But I also remember walking into the you guys have like a vision board that has like all like Lizzo's on it, and like all these inspirational females, and I think my boss and I were like, hey, what's this all about? And they're like, oh, this is kind of like our woman inspiration board. And I thought that was really cool. And I didn't know that about WhistlePig, and I think it's definitely something cool. But yes, to your point, they're in the positions they're in because they're extremely talented and knowledgeable, and it was inspiring and enlightening on my end. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to work with them.
So what is working in Shoreham, Vermont? I guess what's your favorite thing about working at the farm, and then what's your not so favorite thing?
Ooh, all right, that's an interesting question. All right, so favorite thing.
It is an actual farm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it weren't pitch black outside, I would grab this laptop and I would walk outside and I would show you guys. But no, yeah, it's an actual farm. So we exist on it was a dairy farm back in the 1800s, and we bought it in 2008 or 2009. I forget now. And we've slowly been converting it into a farm and distillery where we opted to grow our own grain. So it's on a 500-acre property. We have a wetland that runs right through the middle of it, which has some really great biodiversity, which honestly has been really great for our crops because it really supports a lot of insect life. I'm sorry, falling down a rabbit hole here. But yeah, so we have over 300 acres of planted farmland here where we grow rye, wheat, corn, barley. We'll mess around with a lot. But what's really great about it is, as much as I love my job, of course I have tough days and I have meetings where I'm just sort of like, oh goodness, this is the worst. And even on days where it's just sort of rough and I'm in meetings back to back to back to back to back, I get to step outside the barn. I get to look out into the fields, and it's just beautiful. It's always just beautiful. And regardless of whatever season it is, even in the dead of winter when it's nothing but snow, it has this really elegant quality.
We were there in early January, I remember.
Yeah, so all right, so you tell everybody. I don't need to say anything. You have firsthand experience.
I was there for 2 days. So I will say this, though, the accommodations and hospitality that you and your team provided us, and I'd imagine anyone that comes to the farm, was 5-star. It was, I think we raved about it we still rave about it, just how amazing it was. And, I think we're working on doing another trip there next year. And we may be giving away a spot on that trip to potentially a loyalty member. So if you're not part of our loyalty program at Eureka, I highly recommend maybe signing up for that and keeping an eye on that. And, there's some cool perks that come along with that. And obviously I'm trying to plug our loyalty program a bit here, but we are considering doing some type of giveaway for our loyalty program. And just keep an eye out for that. More details to be announced at a later date. I want to talk a little bit about Boss Hog, because I know you have a big part in that. What goes into that? Because obviously you're the R&D distiller. How do you decide what finishes to use? That seems like probably one of what I'd imagine is one of the most fun parts of your job, to
without
be
a
on
doubt.
the team that comes up with those ideas.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's incredibly fun and incredibly stressful. So, I mean, a lot of how Boss Hog gets made is really just picking some sort of inspiration source that I've never seen really anywhere else in the spirit industry, or at least in whiskey, and then just running with it, seeing how far I can take it. And so a lot of my R&D, with very rare exception, do I ever go into a project being this is Boss Hog. It all starts with me being can I do this? Has anyone done this? Let me try to do this. And so I just follow it to fruition. It's either sometimes inspired by cuisine, sometimes inspired by a place. But what's really great about it is, so every year, of course, like any business, you have to sit down and talk the numbers and stuff the other. So I was talking to our CEO and I'm like, hey, so what's the, R&D budget for this year? Trying to figure out all right, how ambitious can I really be? And he sits down, he stares at me for a second, and he just goes, "You can't buy diamonds." And then he gets up and he walks away. So I really do have a pretty wide berth of what they allow me to do here.
You didn't say gold.
I mean, you're not wrong. But no, so, it's really just me trying out all sorts of things. And then typically through my experiments, we'll start to see like, oh, hey, like this actually is like a really promising idea. Let's like really put a polish on this. And then, of course, like the rest of the team is also involved. I'm not just like a one-man army cranking out boss hogs. That's absurd. I'm good, but I'm not that good. And then, yeah, so right now I'm actually putting the finishing touches on 10, so that'll be fun. That'll be exciting. But that's sort
When
of
is that slated to come out?
Creation. What was that?
When is that slated to come out?
I believe it's slated to come out either late Q3, early Q4. I got to be honest. When it comes to when these things are released and their pricing, like I'm so far in the weeds on whiskey creation that I can't remember.
You can tell me to kick rocks, but is there any teasers you can give us?
This is without a doubt the most ambitious boss hog we've taken on. That's about the most I'll say about it.
I look forward to seeing what your ambition will bring us.
I think people like it. I think you'll enjoy it.
Well, I mean, your track record speaks for itself. So I do want to, before I forget, I do want to highlight a couple people. If you have your Whiskey Club cards that you got in your membership. So we did bring two really awesome leaders in our company to the farm with us this year. And that was our general manager of our Ontario restaurant, Zeke Castillo, and our the regional director for some of our Southern California restaurants, Jason Tonelli. And they were brought on this trip just because of their amazing leadership skills and, obviously hitting some metrics for our company and just proving that they're awesome people that work for us. And I mentioned them because during the tasting that we did with Mitch, and this was not planned. We didn't realize we were going to do this. It was kind of just like a in the moment kind of thing. We were talking about, hey, I like this barrel. I like this barrel. What's the reason you like it? Yada, yada, yada. And we all went down the line, and there were 5 of us, and we said, hey, everyone picked their favorite barrel. And, Zeke and Jason picked their barrels, and then I think it was my boss's idea, and just said, like, hey, could we just put, Zeke's pick or Jason's pick on the label, and that's what we did. So, we all 5 of us had a say in what barrels were picked, but if you did get on one of your labels says Zeke's pick or Jason's pick, just know that those 2 were hand selected by those 2 awesome leaders in our company, and we're really grateful to have them. And we hope you enjoy those picks. We also released a 10-year pick that we had, I think, about 2 barrels of. So restaurants do have the 10-year pick as well. It's $125 a bottle. So that was just a really fun experience in selecting those whiskeys. And Mitch was an amazing orchestrator of the event, and he can be thanked equally for these selections as well. Before we get into tasting the whiskey, I do want to just ask you one quick question, but I got to put my diapers on. So how do you guys select? You guys do a ton of cool collaborations. You just did a collaboration with Pit Viper. I think you did was it a collaboration with like Sunkissed back in January or February? Mm-hmm. So how are you part of the team that decides those collaborations? Like, how does that come about? And I promise I won't leave these on for the rest of the call because look like
I think you look really fly. So, you leave them on as long as you want to leave them on. No, a lot of this just sort of happens organically, right? We're sort of just known in the industry, and like even outside of the industry, like general civilians are huge fans of us. Other companies are huge fans of us. And so like, we did a collaboration a while back with Traeger for smoke stock. And really that was just like our CEO met their CEO on a whim. It's just sort of like, whiskey and smoked meat just makes sense. And everyone was just sort of like, yeah, it does make sense. We should do a thing. And so like, that's really how that started. And then, you know, I met their team and, you know, they came to the farm and the whole thing just sort of happened organically. I mean, granted, you know, some people aren't cool enough to have collaborations with us. But, you know, in general, like, you know, if you are existing in a space where like you're doing really great work, you've sort of challenged the industry, you know, you sort of like make people look at things differently, you know, like we're fans. And if you want to work with us, we'll work with you. We'll figure it out. You know, I'm always open to new ideas, new people, and I love highly creative people.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'll take these off, but I just wanted to, I thought that was a good segue into that question. So yeah, let's taste the whiskey. I just stupidly poured myself a glass of 10-year. So let me grab another glass and we'll pour the. You want to tell us a little bit about Piggyback in general while I grab this glass and just kind of the history behind it? And
Sure.
I think I started 5 questions in one, but could you also touch on like I think this is one of the first times where you've only been doing barrel picks at Piggyback for a very short amount of time, if that's accurate. Like,
no, that is.
Can you give us the background of Piggyback and why you guys decided to start doing barrel picks?
Sure. All right. So to answer one of that phone book of questions, Piggyback as a product for us really got started as a thank you to bartenders. So when WhistlePig first got started off, you know, we were really embraced by the bartender community, who was really glad to have this really nice whiskey that really like stood up in cocktails, and it filled a void in the back bar that wasn't really filled by anything, you know. And so it just like, we really had this love of bartenders. However, bartenders did have their complaints because like, all right, so the classic 10-year, nice big broad shouldered barrel or bottle rather, you know, big cork, wide pour spout, looks great on a back bar. But for Pete's sake, it doesn't fit in a well. You can't put a speed pourer in it, and it's just sort of awkward in the hand when you're trying to sling cocktails. So our master distiller, Dave Pickerel, before he passed, was dedicated to coming out with essentially an entire like thank you SKU for bartenders, and that was Piggyback. You know, we wanted something that fit in a well. You could easily grab it by the neck and easily sling cocktails. You could put a speed pourer in it. And also we wanted something that like we could really start to like give out to our bartenders at, you know, still keep that high prestige that you expect from WhistlePig, but at a price where like we're not punishing bars for buying it. I mean, that's sort of the long and short of it. Hang on. There were like 10 more questions.
No,
I only covered 2 of them.
And then I guess what was the decision to start doing barrel picks? Because I think I heard from a lot of our members that were like, oh, I didn't know that they did barrel picks at Piggyback and at Cask Strength. So, I mean, obviously with Cask Strength, as our members know, that a lot of these bottles are going to be different proofs. I mean, the one that I have here is 114.6 proof, but I mean, some of them, this is 113.1, 109.5, 112.9. So, I mean, was it just the popularity of barrel picks in general, or what kind of, was it a demand thing? I mean, you tell me.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, so I wouldn't say a demand, because I mean, like at the time, like no one knew it was coming, so they didn't know how they could demand it. But you know, everyone has always been asking for like as much like Vermont-based stuff as they can possibly get, and so we had been laying down whiskey for a long time. When we had our 100% rye hit 6 years, and we're like, you know what we should do? We should just add this to the single barrel program. Because unfortunately, once again, you know, we are a smaller distillery. We're not a huge, you know, 10
Oh
foot.
yeah, no, it's not a big
still
operation at all. I mean, I think myself and the people we went with were like, oh wow, this is. I mean, I didn't expect like a huge operation, but it is a fairly. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say small, but it's, you know, it's smaller than you would think.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we're rocking 2 750-gallon combination pot column stills. And granted, we really put them to work, But, at the end of the day, like, they're just two small stills. We're just this small farm in Vermont. But we really want, like, our core goal is to always, like, create more whiskey here and get more whiskey out there into the wild that we can, that is really just a true expression of ourselves. And so, yeah, we had the opportunity to do that with Piggyback. And we're like, the people need this. We should give it to them.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, juice from the farm, regular Piggyback is sourced. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So awesome. So even I'm pumping up this bottle even more. It makes it even more special, and obviously at cask strength. So I have my tasting notes here as always. If you, as always, in the comments, we highly encourage posting the barrel number, the proof that you have. If you have Zeke's pick, if you have Jason's pick, if you just have one of the other picks, throwing out some tasting notes. What do you smell? What do you taste? I have mine here. Obviously, I use a lot of references to like baking and things from my childhood. So like right off the bat for me, this is based off of the pick I got, which is the 114.6 proof barrel 8423. I got a ton of snickerdoodle cookies on the nose, nutmeg, cinnamon, some grapefruit zest, tangerine, very citrus forward notes. On the palate, a lot of like caraway, rice, spice, obviously being 100% rye, like dark cacao, chocolate, cardamom, cured leather, and cinnamon. And then just a lot of vanilla, and I get like a lemon zest, like citrus thing on the finish.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I get. Mitch, what do you get when you taste cask strength Piggyback? Typically, what are some notes?
I mean, so you're dead on with those baking spices, and it's one of the things that I really like about Piggyback. It tends to be really big on cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, clove. But then, just due to the barrel char that we tend to use, like we still also have like that nice sort of like back sweetness, a little bit of like vanilla caramel. And then, right on again, the rye that we've utilized here, like really carries this very bright citrus note to it. I usually associate it with, for the most part, like almost like lemon zest. But every once in a while, there's a barrel that comes along that has like this really nice, deep, like candied orange sort of citrus to it. But it's that variety that makes me love the single barrel program.
I get that candied orange a lot in tenure.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into our questions here really quick. I got two things before we do that. One, the link that everyone received today, if you got the link with the info for today's call, you may have noticed that all these questions we're asking this whole year about, hey, pick a song. We finally released the first 6 months of our Whiskey Club playlist on Spotify. So all those songs that I've chosen, all the songs that our guests have chosen are now on there. Hit play, hit shuffle, drink some whiskey, and have a good time. And hopefully everyone enjoys it. So, Mitch, I've already added your songs to the playlist, but do you remember what they are? If not, I'll tell them.
No. I remember what they are. So one song that I know that I added, it's sort of on the nose, but by gosh, it really represents WhistlePig well. So it's Whiskey Fever by Dorothy. And it's just like this classic sort of like indie rock, heavy sort of like crunchy guitar, led off by a killer female vocalist and songwriter. And I just couldn't think of a more WhistlePig song that like really fit. And then the other one, which sort of fits, I think it fits really well with us. Oddly enough, the song is called Dirty by Grandson. And there's this one lyric that like really stands out to me. And it's basically just like, do you have enough love in your heart to like get your hands dirty? And I feel like that really speaks to my whiskey making experience, because like making rye whiskey's not easy. Like making Boss Hog's not easy. I'm doing all these really odd, unconventional things that like American whiskey makers for the most part don't really mess around with, because it's either a pain in the butt or a labor of love, or it takes too long, or it's too sticky. But the best things come if you're really willing to get down and dirty with it.
Nice. My selections this month were a song called Dizzy on the Come Down by a band called Turnover. Thought that just the name was fitting for drinking whiskey. It's also kind of just like this cool shoegaze kind of like, I don't know, I think it's just like kind of a vibey song. And then the other song is one of my favorite Irish, I can't think of it, like just Irish songs. It's called The Parting Glass, and Hosier did a cover of it, and Ed Sheeran does a great cover of it. I like the Hosier cover better. So those are my 2 picks for the month. So we got 26 songs on that playlist, and go check it out and drink some whiskey. And then last thing, I got a little other shameless self-promotion, and we'll get into questions. We launched our Eureka Tiki mugs this month, designed by Tiki Tony and Tiki Land Trading Co. These are available at all Eurekas. $60. You get the mug and a cocktail in the mug. So the mug's actually really only like $44 because you get the cocktail as well. But handcrafted, limited edition, really badass mugs available at all Eureka restaurants. Really high quality. So let's get into some questions. And we'll pick a couple winners, and it'll be a good time. All right, so let's see here. I don't know what this question means. I'm going to ask anyways. Marcus Matson, who's the biggest whiskey pig you know?
The biggest whiskey pig I know. Oh man. All right. Well, there's a lot of ways to go about this. I mean, naturally, I meet a lot of whiskey collectors in this industry, right? And I have whiskey collectors that will come through the farm. And without giving names, there's one whiskey collector that has his collection insured for it's something absurd, like $15 million. And he built an extension to his house that's approximately the same size as the room I'm in right now. And I mean, hang on, let me pivot so you can get a glance of how deep this room goes. It's about the same distance of depth that this room is. And it is wall to wall whiskey. So at least in that regard, like biggest whiskey pig, like he's got a collection, and he has every single WhistlePig that has ever been launched, including like some of our earliest SKUs, like 111, which was like our first. It's like Boss Hog before Boss Hog was 111. He has like a case of it. He's a madman.
Damn. All right. Well, this is kind of in line with that last question, but who are Mortimer Jr. and Orwell, and do they ever get to taste the spent mash?
I mean, so first of all, they deserve better than spent mash. Like, we will freshly grind grain for Morty J and Orwell. But they are our 2 mascot pigs that live here on the farm. I would run up the hill and visit them. However, it's pitch black, so you wouldn't see them anyway. Yeah, no, I mean, we honestly, you were talking before about our hospitality, and honestly, we just like treating people like their family when they come here. But, you know, so we do have a chef that like cooks whenever you come for barrel picks. And so like we feed them.
Phenomenal chef, by the way.
Well, and that's the thing. So like, you know, anything that like we don't eat, like any of like the salad de coutrement or like fruits, what have you.
Oh, that's
like,
right. We took the leftovers to go feed them. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they, you know, for the most part, they eat better than I do. I mean, you know, a lot of times if I'm here late at the distillery and when I finally get home, you know, if it's too late at night, I'm not going to go through trouble making something. Like, I'll cook myself some chicken nuggets in the microwave and call it an evening. So they eat better than I do for the most part. So a lot to be jealous of there.
That's awesome. All right. So this was a bit of confusion that I saw online. Sure. And Gary Zellman is asking this question. So the bottle says single barrel, but it also says small batch here. So my interpretation of it is that this is the regular WhistlePig label, right? With the different proof. And then this is the custom sticker. So I'm assuming that you just small batch is left here because that's what's on the regular piggyback label. but this truly is a single barrel pick. This is not
That is
small
a
batch.
single barrel pick. So
So
there
I
are
just need to
times.
clear the air because we had some people that were questioning that if it were a single barrel pick or not.
So no. It is a single barrel pick. It is in fact from a small batch mash, right? So 750 gallons. Whenever I run the stills, it's not one barrel comes off from every 750 gallon mash that I put in. That would be absolutely silly.
Yeah.
So no, but every single mash that I do, it basically produces approximately, it's like 7.5 barrels. So I will get 7.5 barrels from one small batch run. And then each of those barrels will, across the years that we've been doing this, will go to various parts of the warehouse. But that's along the story of that. So it is small batch. It's not just one giant continuous still like a lot of the larger stills in Kentucky. Granted, if my CEO is watching, I would really love a tall continuous still because I really need more whiskey and like to make more whiskey. But that aside, no. So that's sort of why that nomenclature is there.
Got it. All right. So clear in the air. It is a single barrel pick. All the bottles are from one barrel. Just to make sure that we've got confirmation on that.
Yep. I'll have my marketing team straighten that out for next year's labels.
Got it. All right. This is a good question. Mitch and Trevor, you both have a good amount of experience in brewing as well. What beer would you pair with Piggyback for a classic Boilermaker?
Oh, well, I mean, all right. So classic Boilermaker, then you're sort of getting into like all of your old school major beer players. I mean, if I'm going to go
it's a style of beer. I don't think you need to name a brand. If you want to, feel free, but I think it's just a style of beer.
I mean, if you're going to do a style of beer for a Boilermaker, I'm sorry, but it's got to be true blue American lager. Like, that's just what does it. Granted, what I think, if you're going to put a spin on it, like if you could find like a maple brown or a hazelnut brown ale, I really think that paired along with like the baking spices, I think that would be like the pristine Boilermaker for Piggyback. What do you got? No, what do you think? Hang on.
I'm gonna go with like a double IPA with a good solid malt backbone. Not anything that has, not like these double IPAs now. Like, you know what comes to mind? This is gonna be a throwback. Is Great Divide Hercules.
Oh my god, that was a beautiful beer
with this spicy rye. For some reason, that just sounds. I don't know how I pulled that out of, where, but that just clicked in my head. Like this double IPA with this solid malt backbone, nice floral notes, and I think just dropping in this nice spicy baking spice rye would be phenomenal. So that's my answer. But I like that. I like that malty brown sounds amazing as well.
We're just going to have a tasting about it. We'll sort it out. We'll get back to everybody.
Mark Horowitz asked, does WhistlePig grow its own unique strain of rye on site?
So we are talented distillers. We're pretty all right farmers. And so, granted, our rye crops year after year have been really, really great. And like our tons per acre have been increasing year over year. We are not so emboldened as to start, genetically modifying or like selecting for our own specialty rye strain. Not yet, anyways. I'd love to do that in the future, but for right now, I want to see if I can get more tons per acre off of these fields before I start getting into the nitty-gritty of making my own rye varietal.
Awesome. All right, let me All right, so Matt Archer asks, does WhistlePig provide grains to the brewing industry? Seems like there's a large void with all the recent maltsters shutting their doors.
I mean, so we've done some work with local breweries up here in terms of like collaborations. A couple of years back, we did a collaboration with Harpoon Brewing Company, and they actually came out with a rye IPA that used our rye. But I got to be honest, most brewers don't want rye. You know, if you think it's tough on the distilling side, it's even
stuck
tougher
mash
on the
tuns
brewing
or something,
side.
right?
And you have to be really careful with it on a brewing side, because if you use even just like 1% too much, it will take over your beer and you will lose all the balance that you thought you were going to have.
You can get stuck in your mash tun too, right?
Oh yeah, that's the thing too. Like, if you're not careful about it, if you don't use rice hulls to help sort of like separate out your mash and create channels, you will have a stuck mash, which is terrible. I've experienced that on a 120 barrel system. It was really embarrassing. I had to call my boss at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Terrible, but that's a story for another time.
Michael Osur wants to know, what would you say the main difference between Canadian rye and the Vermont-based rye is?
I mean, I gotta be honest. It sounds terrible, but not a lot. I mean, you have to remember that, like, from my house, Montreal's 2 hours away. So, like, we share an ecosystem. Like, we share a temperate zone. So, granted, the rye that we grow here, and like, you can taste this through Piggyback, and you can even taste it in farm stock. It's very sort of like floral. It's very sort of like light, expressive. It's very nimble. Where it's like most other ryes that you encounter out in the market, like, they're very black pepper heavy, you know, cinnamon, but like in a hot and spicy sense, crushed white pepper. You know, that seems to be like their real claim to fame.
Nice.
But this is me applying, you know, years of whiskey drinking and nuance to something that most people would be like, wow, that's rye.
That's why you have your job.
I mean, yeah, I'd like to think I'm pretty okay at it.
Linda Archer says, what do you think is your perfect age statement for a rye whiskey?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. My goodness. Oh, man, I'm sorry. I'm applying way too much thought into this.
Nerd out. Do it. Just nerd out.
Honestly, so I'm not going to lie. I really think that you have to break the 10-year to really start to get a lot of depth in your flavors. Not that Piggyback doesn't have like this beautiful explosion of flavors, baking spices, citrus, but like, you can really do some really impressive things with rye once you cross that 10-year threshold. I mean, I've just being here, I've gotten a chance to try, you know, like 17, 18-year-old ryes. And they are so elegant, and I like them so much. But like, there's so much that goes into that. I mean, like, what yeast strain are you using? Like, is it just going to be 100% rye? Like, what was that crop year like? Like, there's so much that goes into that. I want to get deeper into that, and I will in the future. But for right now, that's where I'm going to leave my answer.
10-year.
You got to break that 10-year mark.
Break that 10-year. So anything 10 or older, kind of. For another day.
There's so much to that, and I really want to answer it to its fullest, but we'll be here for another 2 hours.
That's fine. Sean Tallman asks, who came up with the baseball bat finish for the Big Poppy release? How did you know it would work?
I mean, so listen, there are times where you do things on faith. And so this was another example of just sort of like, it just happened to be like an organic thing that happened. We just came to find out that Big Poppy liked WhistlePig, and we're like, what? Like, how did we get here? Like, it was like one of the first moments in like WhistlePig history where it's just sort of like, oh wow, this like really, really famous person that we all admire, like, knows who we are. We're all sort of like fangirling out in the background. But yeah, so the project sort of came up with like, oh, hey, you know, like Big Pop, we'd love to do something with you guys. And like, you know, what could we do? And we were trying to think of like, oh, how can we do this and like really, you know, tie it back to him? And it's like, well, you can make barrels from ash. Baseball bats tend to be made from ash. Why don't we just, you know, essentially treat it like a stave, toast the bat, and then see what happens to the whiskey? I mean, granted, the results.
I should know this. I'm a huge baseball fan, and I should know this, but I can't think of how. What type of wood is a baseball bat made out of?
So a lot of them are either They can be ash or hickory. I've heard of
That's
some maple bats as well, but I think they're lesser used now. Unfortunately, my expertise really like starts at fermentation and ends at distillation. When it comes to sports, I can't say that I'm the most well known. Please, Whiskey Club, if anyone watches baseball, help me out. But for this particular case, we used ash.
I'm going to do a quick Google search.
Oh, please.
I'm seeing maple.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'll have to look it up later. I don't want to waste.
No, it's all good.
All right, a couple more questions here, and then we'll pick our favorites. All right, I want to ask this. Mark Valpreda asks, is the story about WhistlePig's name coming from passing a hiker telling to look out for a whistling pig true?
So I've only been here since 2020. I was not around for the formation of the company. And I've heard a lot of stories about how WhistlePig got its name. Some of them I can't even repeat here, and we'll only tell a priest in confession. But that is one of the stories I have heard. Yes.
All right.
I wish I had a better answer for you, but I'm still sorting out the truth myself. Once I do, I will let you know.
That's funny. All right, we're going to do one more question, then we'll pick some winners here. Sure. With the WhistlePig distillery and farm being 100% solar powered, can you share some insight into the effort that is being taken to be sustainable?
I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're all Vermonters up here. So we want to be as sustainable as possible in every single one of our practices, whether it comes to how we work the land, how we distill, how we get our energy. We're always trying to get better. And I think that's one of the important things that sort of gets lost in the whole talk of like, sustainable energy, green energy, whatever the heck you want to call it, where it's just sort of like, it's not a one-step solution. There aren't any one-step solutions. All the easy answers have been answered. Like, it's now time where it's just like, it might not be the perfect solution, but you always just have to strive to be better. And so we were really excited when we got that solar array online. But yeah, we're always looking at everything that we do, every facet of the business, distillation, fermentation, everything top to bottom. We're always trying to figure out, like, how can we do this better?
Awesome. All right, well, let's run through the questions here, and then you can pick your top two, and then we'll pick a couple winners.
Sure.
We have the question about who's the biggest whiskey pig, who are Mortimer and Orwell, or I'm sorry, Mortimer Jr.
Yes, I was about to say
Mortimer Sr.
The Mortimer, unfortunately, has now passed away. May he rest in peace.
Gary Zellman asked the question about single barrel versus small batch. We had the question about brewing and the boiler makers. Question about unique. Does WhistlePig grow on a unique rye strain on site? Difference between Canadian rye and Vermont-based rye. Question about perfect age for rye. Question about supplying the brewing industry with any rye grown. The Big Poppy question about the baseball bats. The question about the name, where the name came from. And the question about WhistlePig being a sustainable solar powered distillery. So top two questions. I know you got the easy job. I have the hard job because I have to pick the winner.
Sure. Well, I mean, for one, they're all great questions. I'm really glad everyone was so engaged and really thought about what they wanted to ask. I mean, so in no particular order, best Boilermaker. I mean, thank you for making me think back to my brewing industry times and like really, that's the first time I've been asked that question. So like, honestly, good on you. I'm taking it. But then if only because I didn't have enough time to answer it, I also really appreciated the best age statement for rye question.
All right, let's see here. I got to go with my gut. I liked the Boilermaker question the best. I thought it was a good question. So Sean Tallman, we got a bottle of 18-year coming your way, and then Linda Archer, we got a bottle of farm stock coming your way. Both bottles signed by the distilling team at WhistlePig. So we'll be reaching out to you to get your addresses and get that sent out. And Mitch, I can't thank you enough. It was such a pleasure to taste with you in Vermont, and look forward to doing it again next year. And
Sounds great. I'll be here. Can't wait.
All right. Well, have a good night, sir. Thank you to all our members. Appreciate your time, and have a happy Tuesday. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.